and started to see that there was law, Namousa, and law, Aurita, and discover really what they were, and that Aurita has a really nice, wow, I'm starting to get like tingly all over too, marriage with Aleph, that from a place that has no beginning comes Aurita. And then, so that, the sacred languages to me, all of a sudden I started not looking at scripture differently is not, I know you guys can relate, is not the right words, which leads me to the words, but a knowing and understanding of, we have a lot of cats around here. We rescue cats. And if you've ever tried to point to something and get a cat to look at it, and the cat stares at the end of your finger, right?
Right.
Well, that's what I had been doing for 20 years as far as theology, apologetics. Oh, dude, I was growing up in the Church of Christ spiritually. Oh my, you want to talk, wanted to argue scripture. But the scripture was pointing at something, and I was telling people they were holding up you're pointing with the wrong finger. And then this discovery, this experiential revelation of what Aurita is. Like, in that, oh wow. So the law of Moses was really like the rules of Moses, the ordinances of Moses that actually change over time, culturally and religiously, and all these different influences on Namousa. And then, 2 Corinthians 3 all of a sudden comes to life, and it's like, I get it now. I get that the law has some glory.
Oh, very much so.
The Namousa has a degree of glory.
Yes.
Because it's
like a half measure.
Right. So I say all the time online, words are awesome, but words are symbols of symbols.
Yeah.
Twice removed from reality. That's A Course of Miracles. But so the character Paul, that's a whole nother podcast, says, the law has a degree of glory, but even today when the Namousa is read, there's a veil.
Yeah.
And to have that veil removed and experience Aurita, you can't unsee that.
No.
You can't unfeel that. You can't unknow that.
No.
And and you can point to it, and this is all I try to do now, because I have been cured of evangelism, of saving people, of all this stuff. I've been cured of that. I'm like, I can point to the way that I can point in the direction of before the beginning, of without a beginning to you. I can't make you see it. That's way above my pay grade. I can't, and if you're not ready for it, you won't see it.
No.
So
Experience.
I say all of that just to say my relationship with the sacred languages is, I don't even want to use the word reverence. I have an appreciation, because I think that the people speaking these languages vibrationally were closer to Aurita than obviously we are now in Christianity and Islam and all the other Namousas that are out there trying to get you to follow their package. And yeah, they all have a degree of glory, but if I can just get people for just a glimpse, just a millisecond, to get free of self, space, and time and just experience it one time.
That's all it takes.
But so utilizing social media to do that, and this kind of brings us to it's a really touchy subject of I've done a couple videos on spiritual ego, and it's not a bad thing. You know, the truth community has has this war against ego, which develops spiritual ego. It's the war against. So I don't know how familiar you are with the law of one, the raw material. My view of 2 Corinthians 3:16 is a little unique. That I believe whoever wrote that was saying that all scripture, and I believe when in saying scripture, specifically the prophets, was God breathed. That even in the Greek, the word for breathe is a form of pneuma, only used once in the New Testament, which I'm really, really leery when that happens, when they basically kind of make up a word. It kind of shows me what was going on in the translation process. Like, we don't have a word for this, so this one's close. We'll just kind of give it a jot or a tittle and, stick it in there and hope that it works. But if he was referring to the prophets, the Aramaic word for prophet means a clear and open channel. And he's kind of saying that everything out, not the law, but everything that we call scripture coming from what we call prophets, a clear and open channel.
Channeling.
But can be used for, and this is why I have a really weird relationship with the character Paul and the New Testament, because I know the Father, and I know the Father would never use anything divine to force me to do something against my will. So the second half of that is all scripture is channeled work and is useful for basically controlling people, getting people to do what you want them to do, rebuking, training, teaching. It's useful for that. So I took a second look at a lot of the channeled works, but especially the law of one. And it really resonates with the difference between Aurita and Namousa. That there is a law of one that is Aurita, that is from before the beginning, that is the true law, that is, true is not even the right word. Good night. This is what I hate about words. Like, I know you know what I'm trying to say.
I do.
It's a law that's eternal, that doesn't change. The way I explained it to my wife was, if you take a Christian, a Muslim, and a Jew, and you push them off the plane without a parachute, you have broken Namousa and most cultures. It's called murder. However, the rate at which they fall and what happens when they hit the ground is
it's already predetermined.
It is what it is.
It's the same. Yeah. Right.
So that's the best way that I could explain that, maybe how Jesus would have, in a parable, kind of, as the difference between the two are both useful. But what I really like about the law of one is it kind of helped me with ego, that ego is, and I'm a tech guy my whole life, and so when you say user interface to me, a user interface is what allows people to use websites and software. Without the user interface, there'd be databases and no ability to use them. So ego to me is just how we interface with third density or fourth density, which is upon us. And it's not a bad thing. It just, we have our senses. Some of us have a couple extra ones developing right now, which will help us interface with fourth density. But to me, the law of one is basically Romans 1:20. That since before the beginning, God's eternal power in nature
Excuse me.
has been clearly seen,
Yeah.
clearly perceived in
Right.
the creation. So that was a lot of rambling.
No, it was. I didn't take it as
Sorry.
rambling. Ken needs to go to work, so I just wanted him. He said bye.
See you, Cam.
So he just needed to get to work, and I just wanted him to just see you and say hi and that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So I didn't consider that being rambling. I am familiar with that material, so it's yeah.
Well, I thank him, because then what you posted from him, what he wrote, was explaining how all authority given to me is a bad translation.
It's
and
okay.
it's when I read what he wrote, that's what I got, that all authority given to me is that Aurita coming through you. If you are Tuveun, fully blessed, fully present, open, everything's meek, humble, the ability for Aurita to flow through you is all authority in this realm. People in the truth community all the time, I want to bring heaven to earth. I'm like, that's it right there.
Yeah, I think Ken would say with Aurita would be it's celestial law.
Oh yeah.
It's definitely celestial, so it's a law that is governing everything below. And when you tap into it and you understand it, everything changes.
Yeah, well, actually, what it is, it's already established as a potential of becoming. It's the intention, but we can't comprehend its loftiness until we integrate through the lesser law first. It allows us to self-navigate through humility to render clear what is ego. So ego is actually a propulsion device when it's seen correctly, but we have
Right.
to be able to break free of a construct that is inverted to then see that there is a way of validation, because the celestial law, it seeks its similitude of frequency to call it established. And so it is a means to a purpose. It's very lofty. It's purposed intention, and it's looking for the vibration of similitude.
Do you think it's fair to say that a knowing of Aurita allows ego to become a servant instead of a master?
That's exactly why I don't read the law of one. That's exactly why that I said I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, is that Spirit shared with me that I was no longer requested nor required, and I want to be careful how I say this, is this because celestial law has to be found organically. There are those that are finding it organically without another interpolation through another man's directive through channeling. And so I know, as far as what my mandate and what I'm carrying, and as far as personally to me, is that it can be found organically without, and it just simply is. Virginity to me is something that's built through intimacies, encounters. This is pureness of intention. And so in that innocence, it can be established. Celestial law of light, law of order is established organically. And if one man can find it, then it allows the door to be open to the many.
I agree.
So the influence is crucial, and it's been 7 or 8 years now that the influence has a way of pulling me into another perspective or a paradigm based on another man's perspective, and that's fine and that's okay. It's just I know for how I'm geared and how I'm wired, the Spirit is just like, no, that this can be defined, because that's what was always intended, is for each man to define it through the uniqueness of individuality. This is how sovereignty is established. This is celestial law.
and that's probably why, when I read Law of One now, it's not, I don't worship it. I don't worship the New Testament either. Is that I don't know if you're familiar with Muji, but I had really, coming through a Church of Christ, the idea of meditating was evil, I guess. I mean, it was frowned upon. So, but the first time that I was ever really able to break free of self, space, and time in any real way, that organic experience became real to me, and that's why I say that words to me can be useful pointers,
Right.
but outside of that organic knowing from that celestial place, that in my opinion now, I don't even know if it can be explained with words. Like you said, it's hard. It's probably impossible in duality in any way, shape, or form to get.
Well, yeah, because it's I see it, and I'm sure Ken would agree with it too. It's divine experiential knowledge, that it can only be experienced, and when it gets to that place, then there truly isn't words to be, because it's a state of being.
Well, it's completely knowing what duality is. Duality is purpose to render it clear,
Right.
so you know what center standing is.
Right.
And that's consciousness as celestial law, because celestial law has a destination. We call consciousness as seeing both as an opportunity to become it.
Right.
It simply is a distance from it, and then through the experience. So you know the experience of duality intimately by building its intention.
Yeah.
That is oneness.
And again, the beauty of that for, people that aren't knowing this is Aurita starts with the Aleph, and the Aleph does mean one. And so, and Or is light.
Yep.
So one light, celestial law of one light, the mystery of the many who are one. And it's beautiful because it starts with an Aleph and it ends with an Aleph. I mean, really.
Well, but even the Or, Aleph Vav Resh.
Yeah.
One who is expanded or fully revealed in sovereignty is fully arisen as one.
As a raised head.
As a raised head.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the Eastern man of Kadmon.
Yeah. It's beautiful when you can connect to it at the heart. Have a good day.
See you, Ken.
So what I was saying is that when that Vav connects, when that pierces you on the inside and begins to expand your light, when it begins to expand the light in you, that allows you, I think, to be able to have even greater celestial experiences.
Right. So our for those of us who are attempting to teach, I hate the word teach, but those of us who are attempting to point the way to this realization, this awareness, we have this unique friction placed before us every day. Is that how do we walk amongst those experiencing Namousa as their only view of the Father,
right?
Who many of them are telling us, I'm trying to get somewhere, that I'm trying to ascend, I'm trying to climb a ladder spiritually, vibrationally, all these things, when if they would just be still.
I know. And that's why you were bringing up Muji and meditation. Right. Exactly. Because that's when you give opportunity to be truly touched from the divine. I used to call, like when I would enter into worship, my husband and I used to, before church service. So this is when we were in the Christian church, before we even got into the sacred languages. We were in a non-denominational church that was actually, it was affiliated with Bethel Church with Bill Johnson and that kind of thing. And so, and there was a connection with Mike Bickle and the International House of Prayer. But this is years ago. I mean, we're talking.
Yeah.
I know we've all been down those roads. But we would, in the morning before service would start, we would do what we called pre-service prayer and worship. And so, Ken had and has a gift to be able to feel spirit through music, and start listening. And when you fine tune into that place right here, you know when it's connecting to the divine and when it is not, And so he would set this atmosphere for us to enter into the place of the spirit that was just so beautiful. And we get it in a place where, you're like praise and worship and you're ecstatic and you're having a good time, and then begin to draw it in and draw it in and draw it in and draw it in until you got into the place of what I called soaking. And I know many people have said that before, where the presence of the divine was so strong and so beautiful in its presence and in expression that all you could do is just sit and bask and bathe in it and allow it to enter into you, to be able to touch that place of surrender and be totally okay with it and feel it envelop you and wrap you up, like a mother's warm hug on a chilly morning, or a soothing moment because you scraped your knee and you need that comfort and just squeeze you. And so in that place, when you tap into that, whether it's through worship, whether it's through soaking, or whether it's in meditation, everything changes. And you're right. They're looking for something and they're searching for it, but they're never going to find it unless they enter into that stillness area in that place of surrender. It's not possible.
And I would say that even in that place, if you want a beautiful description of it, of every knee bowing and every tongue confessing.
Yeah.
For me, all of my senses, and this is going to lead maybe us into this direction, all of my senses give up.
Right.
They just say, "Oh, we're out."
That's right.
Bob's here. We're out.
That's right.
They bow.
Yeah.
And so
Ugh.
I've been writing music since I was 7 years old. I'm not just words, music. I've been and poetry, and I was accused that when I was 7 years old, my teacher accused me of plagiarism.
Wow.
I wrote a poem about the Civil War called Brother Against Brother.
Wow.
And they were like, there is no way a 7-year-old wrote this. And in a parent-teacher conference of the principal, I said out loud, I didn't write that. I just wrote it down.
So when it comes from a place of past experience, it can flow out. And really at 7 years old, you still were an open channel.
Well, but here's the cool part about it. I stuttered horribly as a child. I mean, I was the biggest introvert. I never left my room. Both my parents were chain smoking alcoholics back before mental health was a thing, and they were self-medicating. I get it. They did the best they could. But I spent a lot of time alone with Papa. I didn't know that. I didn't know what I was doing. That was home. And I heard things and I wrote them down. And that became, so when I read Jesus's conversation with the woman at the well, I get it. When he says to her, "My Father seeks those who worship the spiritual realm as reality, not in truth and spirit," as it says in English. Even in Greek, it say that.
Right.
My Father seeks those who worship in the spiritual realm as reality. I get it. I get it. Can't explain it. I get it. I can, Dale Allen Hoffman says all the time that the hardest word to translate into English is milta.
Right.
And I get that too. So just quickly, I stuttered. I missed a lot of school. I was a really, really smart kid. I have an IQ over 160, but I hated school for a lot of good reasons. My teachers were jerks, calling on me to read. It was ugly in the 70s in elementary school and middle school. And when I was a senior, I was up late one night watching the Nashville Network, and that's back when they played music on TNN. And I was watching the Ralph Emery show late at night, and they had on Mel Tillis. All of you youngsters will have no clue who I'm talking about. But he's a Hall of Fame country music writer, musician that stutters. And that was the first other human being that I ever saw stutter. And I was transfixed. I was like, wow, there's another one. Like, you know. And then he said something. Ralph said, Mel, with your stuttering, why would you get up on stage in front of people for a living? And he said, Ralph, I discovered that I don't stutter when I sing.
That's right.
I am so lit up right now. It's crazy.
So am I.
And in that moment, my whole life changed.
Yeah.
I went to school on Monday and I prayed that they would call on me to read.
Yeah.
And when they did, I sang it. And I got sent to the principal's office and I smiled all the way down there. And I said, you know what, y'all? I win. Sorry. And that's when everything changed. The honky tonkin country music songwriter guy got born. People are telling me they don't believe in reincarnation. I say, sit down, let me tell you my life story.
That's right. That's right.
And a new one got born right there.
Yeah.
That was Aurita.
Yes.
Who had me as a child, getting me ready for that moment. And so let's fast forward now. January 23rd, 1997, I'm a hell-raising, honky-tonkin', womanizing idiot. And I end up in Louisiana on the banks of the Ouachita River with a Tuesday night men's group from the West Monroe, with the Whites Ferry Road Church of Christ in West Monroe, Louisiana. And I'm sitting there with all these guys with big beards on the banks of the Ouachita River and thinking, these guys look kind of scary, but they're all really cool. And Jace Robertson from the Duck Dynasty Robertsons came up and sat down next to me and asked me if I'd solved my death problem, which was that's how a Church of Christ starts that conversation. But I was baptized that night, and again, my life changed again, because I knew that the me that I egoically built needed to go away.
Right.
He did. So you want to talk about Namousa doing something good and being part of the path? That was it for me.
Yeah.
But the cool part of this story happens about 2 years later. I get invited to go duck hunting with Phil Robertson and the rest of them, which is, if you're a redneck, that's a dream. And yeah, so.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Oh gosh.
So it's pre-dawn. It's getting up way earlier than I ever wanted to. I'm in the duck blind drinking coffee that's at the time was way too strong to drink, but I got it down somehow. Now it's having coffee. And Phil and I had this conversation already about, he produced these duck hunting videos and they use really bad, he described it as really bad porn music from Nashville.
Oh gosh.
That they had to pay for. He goes, you're a songwriter. Can you write us some songs about hunting that we can use in our videos? And I said, well, probably. I said, that's how I got invited. I said, I've never been duck hunting. He said, well, we'd fix that. So I'm sitting there in the duck blind. Phil makes coffee, says a prayer, and I raised my head from the prayer and looked through the swamp at the sun rising, and it was just the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. And in that moment, the song I wrote, that's probably an anthem to all duck hunters around the world, called "The Life of a Duck Man," was dropped into
Wow.
me from the Father.
Wow.
And I looked down at Phil and I said, "I just wrote the first song, Phil." He said, "Conover, you're weird." And I said, "Yeah, I get it." He goes, "How did you just write a song?" I said, "Phil, I can't explain that." And that's, I have a real hard time writing. I have friends in Nashville, and I have because they'll sit around and like construct a song, and I'm like, they're still working on the first couple lines, and I'm like, "I got it. Y'all want to hear it?" Like, and they get mad. It's like, "That's not how we do it." And I'm like, "Well,
When it's Aurita,
right." So,
that's what it is.
but it's also mealtime.
Yes.
So
They go hand in hand.
yeah, I can't explain to you how the thoughts, feelings, and emotions of God, Allah, are dropped into us all the time if we're open. But I can play you lots. I can play you songs that are mealtime.
That's right.
Their music, their words. There was a video in my head. There was, it was a creation was literally dropped through me, and it comes out through a guitar in this hole in my face. That's mealtime.
Right.
That's all I got. I can't. There are no words, especially English.
Well,
Words.
it's why, like,
Right.
for me, when I look at these beautiful Aramaic words and Hebrew words, because they're masculine and feminine in nature, and they're meant to be, because in order for creation to come into pass, to become, to be, to come to pass, Hayah, there has to have the male and female energy. I mean, that's really, we see that in nature. We see it in our own families. It takes a man and a woman to create new life. And so it would be the same in spirit. It has to be the same in spirit in order for those things to manifest here in a slow down vibratory nature. And when I look at Milta, Mem Lamed in Hebrew means to fill, right? And then Tav is a letter that represents the end, or represents covenant or signature or frequency of completion.
Yep.
And then it's with the Aleph. And there's a word that's Tav Aleph in Hebrew, and it has to do with it's a room, it's a place that's like guarded, like a storehouse. And so when you have Milta, and you have this places that is guarded, and this area that is set apart as an enclosure, you're filling up the enclosure, which is us, right? And it's the covenant of oneness, the mystery of the many who are one. And so when Milta comes forward, it's this place that is set apart. It's something that can be accessed by those who tap into that signature frequency of that covenant that is producing oneness. And so as soon as you tap into there, then you take the Aurita, which has got this light frequency of creation, and you have the masculine and the feminine energy coming in, and you can't help but have something new birthed, something that is spontaneous, something that hasn't been heard or seen before, because it's coming from the place of creation. So that vibration continued to go forward, that is drawing those to come into the place of Milta, to come into the Aurita.
In 2 Corinthians, I think it's 5, I think. That's behold a new creation.
Right.
Is literally what's happening there.
Exactly.
It's something that has never existed before. And of course, the masculine religion wants to repackage that and say, "Oh, that's you when you agree to what we say." you're a new creation. And I'm like, no, that's
No.
not what that means. But you know, but that's every time I hear somebody talk about the masculine and the feminine, I think about what religion is, because people say you're saying religion is bad. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just saying it's when you just take the masculine and run with it, you have no idea what you're leaving behind. I mean, it's
Well,
not even the
there,
right word.
it cannot have new life, right? Because
And it
it
doesn't.
takes both. And so you cannot become a new creation or new creature, right? You cannot unless both are present. And that's like what I've shared many times about the Cayutha, was just translated as beast, but it's also the same creatures that open the scrolls in Revelation chapter 7. So what is it? Are these the creatures that have access to the scrolls because they are the living scrolls, or is it a beast that we should be afraid of?
Yeah, it's
Because it has the utha at the end. That suffix is so powerful because
it's
you've now connected to the divine feminine energy, which allows you to create from the place of the covenant and bring forth oneness through spirit breath. Like if people could just grasp the magnitude of what is being shared and take it into that place of meditation, like you were talking about earlier, and have that divine experience, because it's really mysticism. Let's call it for a term that somebody would maybe comprehend.
cool.
I know, right? But those of us who've experienced it understand how tangible it is, and it wrecks the ego. It like demolishes the spiritual ego. And so when you were asking, can it be a servant? Absolutely it can, because it's the only way through that mysticism, through that divine experiential knowledge, that the ego can then be service to the creator. It's the
Well, yeah,
only that we
and
can come in and co-create with the creator is to diminish that spiritual ego, get into the place where we've been humbled because the presence is so overwhelming that we've entered into the Aurita, and then we are now total and we have the ability to serve the Father.
yeah. So people ask all the time. When the subject of ego is probably the central point of confusion for the truth community.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And people want to be without ego, and I always tell them, no, you don't. Because if you didn't have smell, touch, all your senses, this density would suck. There's no other word. I mean, how would you experience this thing you call life? Even though that's not Haya. I mean, it is and it isn't. It's
Right.
how would you experience the masculine part of Haya without all of your senses?
Right.
So you don't want to be ego-less. You just don't want the ego that has been your master. That's what you want to be without. Like I tell atheists all the time that say there is no God. And I'm like, well, yeah, I understand what you're saying. And in many ways, I would agree that the God that you've been shown, I would, a lot of times I wouldn't want to follow either. I get that. But that's just the masculine. And once you introduce them to the feminine, and especially the feminine teaching of the one we call Jesus, and that's what I thank Alan Hoffman for all the time, because he was my introduction to truly understanding the feminine teaching. That his main emphasis, because he was in his form and in duality, he was in. You want to talk about a masculine dominant expression of consciousness? Holy cow! I mean, and he's trying to bring feminine into the understanding of people. And I always go back to the woman at the well. I think that's one of the coolest. My two favorite, I don't want to say favorites, but the woman at the well and the scribe conversation are two places that most evangelical or Orthodox Christians don't want to spend any time around. It's like, can't we just go to Paul and, go down the Roman road and do the Paul thing? I'm like, no, let's back up and see what Jesus was talking about here. Because when you understand, like if you study the languages and the culture that go with the languages,
Right.
and who the woman at the well was,
Right.
and what they believed in their culture, and
Right.
why she was at the well at the time of the day she was at the well, and if you think it was an accident that Jesus was there, you're not understanding anything. But it just recently something hit me, Carrie, that I'm still is an incubator about that conversation, because everybody wants to, yeah, she had 5 husbands. She wasn't married to the 6th, the man she was with now. And I'm like, and then the guy on your last video that says, Jesus didn't teach chakras, that's a cult. And I'm like, well, you think it's a coincidence that the woman at the well had 5 husbands, was with the 6th, and then the one she should be with would be the 7th, was right in front of her, and he's saying, if you had any idea who you were talking, you think that 7 number is a coincidence there? It's kind of, it's like I think there's more to that story there. I think it's
Oh,
not
there's
just,
so much more.
oh,
My goodness. I mean, because the number 7, we know the number 7, it's divine spiritual perfection. So you look at the 7 days of creation, right? And then the 8th is the new beginning. But it's also the letter Zayin. It's the sword and the plow, that is crucial to be connected to. And I think that part of that, and I want you to continue on because I know I'll have somebody say that I'm interrupting you. But the part of that is so crucial is that when we are combating religious dogmas, when we are confronting cultural norms or biases, or especially masculine energy that has set this religious foundation and really into the spiritual ego and what can happen with that, with just the masculine energy, we have to allow the sword and the plow to come in to pierce us, right? It's like, it's interesting that the Vav would come before the sword and the plow, right? Because
yep.
really an offense, and this is where I wanted to go into this well, and I want you to continue talking about this with the intimacy and because I see this whole story with intimacy and transparency. I see this as being huge, and why people don't want to go into it, because it's so exposing of the shame and guilt that they carry within themselves, and especially the church structure, or not being able to answer questions, right? Not being able to provide the answers as people are seeking, because it touches raw nerves, it touches places of woundings, and things that we just want to sweep under the carpet. For someone to say, I will be honest here, this is my marriage to my husband is number 4 for me. So if you don't think that the woman the well didn't pierce me, or the religious system that said I couldn't share or I couldn't teach, or that I was damaged goods because I had been divorced 3 times prior, and God hates divorce, right? Doesn't realize what this is really saying, because there's, like you said, a much deeper level to it. And this sake of intimacy of what is really going on, and then getting into what that spiritual ego looks like and what forgiveness looks like. I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff going on here. So when we begin to confront the religious or the spiritual ego, this especially, because I would consider this as the spiritual ego, is what I would say is the beast ego, and not the Cayutha kind. I'm just one that is unruly, that thinks it's ruly but isn't. It's because it's shackling the heart and going with religion. So with this beast ego and everything that's going on, when we confront individuals that are in that position, it's hard for me to talk about these things because automatically it's separation right here, because we're saying ego, we're saying spiritual ego. But yet when we're in the system of duality, we're looking at these things to see how we can unify it and bring it into oneness unity. But what will happen is when you come and you bring a truth to someone that has a very strong religious ego, some of these truths that are from the Aurita will go straight and pierce their heart.
Mhm.
It has to. You know, that's why that Vav is in the center of Or. It's like it is meant to pierce your heart. And then that allows us, as your gift, as you shared in your first video about forgiveness, that totally just whacked me too. I mean, I had to go sit with that for a while. And I just revisited it again this morning, and I'm like, dang, that was so good, Steve. But piercing within is then either the sword or the plow that comes next.
Yep.
Because you got to break the fallow ground somehow, and it will be an offense that comes first when truth and when light and when love comes clearly as like this clarion call that comes in and cuts through all of the crap and the garbage that the spiritual ego cements around the heart. And it can't, there's no defense there. I mean, you try, the spiritual
Well,
ego wants to, but my goodness, not when it's Aurita.
well, and that's why, I mean, I just laugh now because, I'm just used to it. But, when you bring a feminine truth into a masculine emotion,
Yeah.
you get attacked personally. I mean,
Yeah.
just, and all, you're deceiving people. My God's going to burn you over coals like you're a marshmallow for eternity, and he's going to enjoy it. And I'm like, whew. But that's just what you get. And I mean, I get that. Because that's what happens with unbridled religious masculinity. It just, that's why there's 35,000 denominations. It just, that's what that happens until that collapses in upon itself, which is in the process of happening.
It is.
But what I would say about the intimacy and I would call it meekness and humility, the true meaning of that, the true openness,
Right.
that the purpose of that is also a bad translation. I mean, there's a reason why, just really quickly, there's a reason why in 3rd century Rome, under Roman occupation, under Roman orders, people did what they did to create a very masculine. I mean, this is how masculine it was. They took a book that Mary wrote and attributed it to John because some dude that supposedly knew John heard something. Anyway.
Right. Right.
I mean, but that's the whole New Testament. But
right.
And for everybody out there that's freaking out right now, it is what it is. But the purpose, the whole teaching of Jesus casting out the 7 demons from Maria Magdalena, which happens to mean divine tower of feminine light, lit up again. Like
that's so incredible. I'm so glad that you brought that forward as an English translation, because that was, oof, yep, exactly.
So casting out the 7 demons, but there's not 7 chakras, there's 7 energy centers. But there were 7 demons to cast out.
Right.
And the word demon comes from the Latin daimonia. It's
right.
not even a Greek or a Hebrew or a Aramaic word. But in Aramaic, a demon is a constricted, a choked off chakra.
Exactly.
Not open.
Exactly.
So what we're really talking about here is the casting out the 7 demons by being humble.
Yes.
Open to receive it. And if you think that's going to happen in a masculine religious Namousa system,
no,
2 Corinthians 3 tells you it won't. That's the whole definition. And see, this is the Christians are turn this off now. Even today, when the Namousa is read, there's a veil. So
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
It's the
Yes.
truth.
Yeah.
But be humble, be open, and let the Aurita cast out the 7 demons. And guess what? You'll be crazy like me.
It'll cast out the 7 demons because you allow the Milta to come in
And you will
and
have
bring forth
all,
Kaya.
and you will have all authority
That's right.
over the heavens and
That's
the earth.
right. That's right. That's so good. That's so good.
The actual teaching of Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, this is the true Besorah. This is the true gospel message of what we have been missing because of the heavy dominant masculine theology. And you can see how that got perpetuated through the sin of Eve, right? But when you even begin to look in the Hebrew aspect of it, which is heavy masculine, but again, the masculine foundation is taught by mother. So if we're talking about raising a child up, right? That masculine A, B, C, D linear, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet is supposed to be a foundational piece that gets put into your subconscious so that a child, as they are raised up in the way they should go, would be continually moving forward in those steps of the Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, A, to take them to the place of completion, which is the Tav. So in the beginning, as the Aleph, and then at the end, as completed the Tav, they are the Aleph Tav. And so that subconscious programming, when it is done in the proper sense and not through the religious dogma of that which is binding, is the foundational piece that is already set to receive the divine feminine. That's the difference. And so when we teach our children that this fall of mankind was based on the sin of Eve, and that original sin was born, and as soon as you came in, you were already tainted, then we've already got a seed planted that women then take as shame and guilt. And trust me, I've had many conversations with people and I've had to wrestle this. I mean, recently have had to wrestle with the shame and guilt connected to being born in a feminine body because it was all my fault. Right? So then you have this dominant patriarchy that comes from this system that is setting the underlying current within every woman that goes through Christianity or even the Muslim faith or even Judaism, that it has all been on woman's fault as to why mankind is in the position that it is, when it is mankind that suppressed the divine feminine that actually caused the fall and has not allowed us to rise up into the stature of the fullness of Milta as the word becoming flesh, masculine and feminine energy, through the Aurita, through that law that was there before time began, before the beginning. This is why Ken talks about Adam Kadmon, the time of antiquity prior to when time started, when there was light being compressed within the blood of mankind before it was even brought forward, so that we would recognize Aurita. And that's why you've seen how the structures are falling apart, because we have the toxic masculinity and we have toxic femininity, because the Aurita has not been allowed to be here because we got Namousa based on the heavy patriarchy. So just kind of paraphrasing everything that we said, but seeing how those foundational pieces, once we can change that, how different, and we are changing it, but how different that will be as a structure being created. And we can see truly why the new heavens and the new earth, as a heavenly earth, will be manifested here. Because
I think celestially, what we're going through right now, with, I don't want to say this word because it's not allowed, but what we're going through right now
Oh, you don't even worry about it. I mean, I know where you're going. So just where we are globally with what we're seeing. Yes. Okay, I got it. I'm picking up what you're laying down.
is our celestial 80-70 moment.
Oh, yeah. That's
And
really good.
and so let's
Yeah.
in Galatians 5 or 6, where supposedly Paul writes about the man is the head and the woman and the kids and all this stuff, which the religious masculine, yes, I'm the boss. And then Paul says something to ignore. This is a very deep thing, and I'm really talking about Christ and the church, right? So that's the bookend of I am the way, the truth, and the life.
Yeah.
Einana. And I don't know what the Hebrew version of Einana is, but it's one of my favorite words. It ends in na, so I know it's feminine. So something feminine is the way, the truth, and the life. And nothing goes to the Father without going through her. So I know this is a deep mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. That Einana, and this is what I love to talk. I mean, and anyone who will sit down with me alone, not on Facebook, not in public, just me, you, whoever, in a room together with Aurita and Milta and whoever else shows up to the party. We're going to talk about what Einana is and how Einana is the way, the reality, the truth, and the Haya. And we'll just take it from there. And then you can decide if you want to go back out the door and you know, the rest, as I say, is above my pay grade. I'm not worried about, because my Father's not ever going to roast you like a marshmallow, not even for a second, much less eternity. I'm not worried about saving you from anything, especially not Father. And this always brings us back to that conversation with the scribe. And maybe we can kind of wrap up on this, is that, you know, people who want to be dogmatic and religious, I've never had anybody answer this question. And the question is, did Jesus lie to the scribe?
Say that one more time. Did Jesus what?
Did Jesus lie to the scribe, who asked him, teacher, how do you get your hands on eternal life? He didn't say anything about a cross. He didn't say anything about following any laws other than Aurita. But here's the part of that, because I think it's a perfect illustration of somebody knowing Namousa, the end of the finger, the cat, and not seeing what it's pointing at. When he says, what does your Namousa? I can never get an answer to that either, by the way. Why is Jesus always saying your law? If the law is from God, you know, nobody, I don't care, a Calvinist, whatever, nobody could ever explain that to me. The Calvinists would just tell me I was born in sin and obviously can't figure it out. But Jesus is saying, what does your Namousa say about that? And the scribe says, well, it says, love God with all your heart, mind, soul, strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus said, what you have said, those words, that Namousa, those things that are symbols of symbols pointing at the reality, is correct. Do that. And you'll have Haya. Experience that. Be that. I wish and he may have said that. Be that.
Yeah.
And you'll have Haya.
Right.
And Haya in Aramaic, and in that culture, especially ancient Aramaic, which is why I love that a lot of the Apocrypha that's, I think, older, the oldest stuff we have. That's why I love the Essene Book of Creation, because it doesn't say before the beginning like the Peshitta does. It says, Bereshit is before the beginning. In the Essene Book of Creation, it means without a beginning, which is why I posted that and tagged you.
It was so good. So good.
Without a beginning, Aurita creates Haya, which is what Jesus was saying to the scribe. Because if Aurita creates Haya, he was telling the scribe, without Aurita, you can't know Haya. And like we talked about earlier, there's a lot of people out there looking with deer in the headlights to that, going, what in the heck are you talking about? And I get it.
I
10
know.
years ago, I would have turned this off a long time ago.
Oh, I know. Me too. Me too. So just to help clarify with people, Chaya is life. It's the word for life. And just if I can add this here, that word in its root does not have the aleph on the end of it. It like life is when you become one with the Creator. That is what true life is. And so I find it interesting that Namousa, right? Nomos is the Greek word for law, but when Yeshua or Jesus is talking about your law, he does add the aleph on the end of it, saying, go and do these things because it should lead you into oneness unity. Go and do it. That's the whole point of it. But if you have to come through laws, rules, regulations, because you're so unruly, you don't even realize that you're one with one another. So we have to create these fence laws so that you can be safe with one another, because there is spiritual gravity that is attached to this.
Yeah.
And as you proceed in your maturation, you are all going to come to the place where you understand that I and the Father are one. You and the Father are one. We are one. But it's going to take you a lot longer journey if you stick to man's laws instead of just bypassing that and going straight to Aurita. Right? It's just a longer journey, but we're all going to get there. And so having Aurita that is already there as established as the benchmark, right? It's already there, the covenant of one, this light, let there be light. Let there be Aurita. I had a conversation with my friend Emery here the other day that I'm releasing on the YouTube channel in bits and pieces, which I'm going to do on this one too, because it's too long. There's too much information here, and I don't want people in their microwave mentality to just stop because they see the video is going to be like an hour and 15 minutes or an hour and a half, and they're freaking out because of the time element of it. I want to be able to break it into bite-sized pieces so that people can comprehend everything that you've been sharing here in our conversation that we're having today, because it's so important to be able to connect to this. So the Namousa will lead you to oneness unity if you don't camp there as a religious and spiritual ego.
If you're not a cat.
That's right.
Not just looking at it like it's the end of a finger, and you're humble enough and meek
What is it
enough.
pointing to?
What is it pointing to?
You know what I find interesting in there too, just if I can share this, because I'm obviously you've heard enough of things that I've shared, how much of a letter geek I am. The symbols that are a symbol, right? So Namousa has the Semek in it. And Semek can be two things. It's either going to hedge you in and pierce you with thorns and keep you from moving, or it's going to be the same thing that is the signet ring and the wedding ring that props you up. And so dependent upon where you are at, if you're looking as a cat at the finger, or you're looking in the direction it's pointed, you're either going to be hedged in and pierced, not allowing movement, or you're going to find the propping up and supporting of that which is giving you the signet ring of authority to move into the oneness unity. It's totally dependent upon where your heart in that position of, like you said, with meekness and humility, of what is pulling you forward. Are you into the separation and division, or are you wanting to come into the fullness of the expression of Aurita, or stay in Namousa until you get to the point where you're like, there's got to be something more.
Well, let's end with this, and maybe we'll use it as a blast off point for another video in the future.
I'd love
But,
that.
but what you just said there, returning to the oneness, one of my favorite Old Testament scriptures is Genesis 11, 1 through about 11. Speaking of returning to oneness, and I've never geeked into Hebrew like you have, but I would love to geek into Hebrew on this scripture, because at the time, the Tower of Babel incident, it says the whole earth. Now, in my brief look at that, earth meant everything, not just a patch of dirt. Spoke one language.
Yeah, exactly.
Then,
Exactly.
but then something happened, and I contend that this is another just description of us just going from what I call second density consciousness into third density consciousness, where we experience separation. I think there was a time before that where we possibly even had like bodies. I don't know. Where everything spoke one language. People, animals, and I'm starting to get, and people ask me all the time, your animals follow you around like conversation. Kind of hard. But then something happened, like a change in consciousness, where we experienced separation. Countries, governments, Namousa. And it's through that experience now that we are desiring, I don't even know if return is the same. It's not. It's just a, maybe we've been just in a third density dream.
Well, you know that
Time to wake up.
part of that return, though, when we, this is because I would like to get into this, but I also want to have another time where we can chat about, I want people to go watch your video on forgiveness, because that's a huge thing. And I was looking at some scriptures, and I was just being mind blown with the information that you were sharing that Spirit was getting through Milta, through Aurita, about what that really looks like. And so going back to where that Tower of Babel was and what they did, Aramaic, well, we call it Aramaic. It is older than Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
So they were speaking through Milta and through the Aurita as in oneness unity. And then because even the word Hebrew doesn't end in an aleph, right? And so the Syriac language, but Aramaic, so you'll hear Ken say Aramic. He won't say Aramaic, he'll say Aramic, because it's Aleph, Resh, Mem, and that is from a word that means exalted or a citadel, right? So Tower of Babel, right? Aramaic, the one language that is an exalted language because of the frequency, because it does affect through cymatics and affects matter and affects our DNA. There's this intimacy that is brought forth, and that is why when you begin studying, especially the Aramaic, and bringing that divine feminine back in, you are so changed. Lars Moule. So if anybody knows who Lars Moule, huge studying in the Aramaic. Neville Goddard, huge studying in the Aramaic. So anybody that has had these influences, and Dale, talking about Dale. So Dale would be the modern day, right? Because Neville Goddard isn't here anymore, but we still have Lars Moule with us, and we have all these writings of what they're trying to get across to us in an inferior language of English that has no vibratory nature, but yet it's called the alphabet, the alpha language, because it causes you to submit. It isn't Aramic, it isn't Aramaic, it doesn't rise you up. It doesn't raise you up into oneness unity. It is continually manipulating us into separating and segregation.
Which is all, and so it's also the answer. So I contend, as long as we're here, that 3rd century, 4th century Rome had the same Tower of Babel moment. And they said, but let's take all this beautiful, sacred truth, put it into Greek, which is like,
exactly. Oh,
I tell people it's like taking an Aramaic love story and turning it into a Greek tragedy.
oh my gosh, that's so good. That's exactly what happened. Oh, you just pierced me with that.
Yep.
I've said something similar, but not so eloquently, that's exactly what Rome did.
Yeah.
And took these letters, and we were told that Greek was the original language. Now, they did have to translate the writings into Greek because the Hellenized Jews lost their culture. They lost the language. And so, yes,
Right.
but to say that that was the original, it's not the case. It was like this was one of the greatest thefts that was ever committed in a system of control that would take away these love letters to us and put in what you just said into a Greek tragedy. That is so beautiful. Thank you for saying that. Like, that's gonna be piercing me all day long thinking about it. And
Well,
why I wanted to have you on, and why I wanted to have Daryl on. And one of these days, I would love to be able to have Dale on as well. Because look, I want people to go wherever their heart leads them. And I am not the end all be all, nor is Ken on the Aramaic language, not at all. We've only had a 6-year, going on 7-year journey on this. I want to have people go where spirit leads them. And I want people to hear what you have to say. I want people to hear what Daryl has to say. So we need to keep encouraging him to open up a YouTube channel, because it was cruddy that our connection was so bad, but you know, his heart's right there as well. And to be able to create a culture where we're coming together and sharing these things.
I know it's intimidating to many.
Yeah.
It was for me at first. But that's back to forgiveness. You need to forgive yourself of that. That's scandalone in Greek, that bait stick. That's all that is.
Yeah.
It's an offense that needs to be removed. It's a timber in your eye, needs to be removed. And if everyone just has the understanding that you'll discover that the language is vibratory, so sweet and gentle and loving, that if you'll just let it show you what it will show you, and just go with it. Just that's, once you're cured of that thought form, that egregon that I call it, that Jesus actually, I can't believe I'm going to do this. We're trying to get off of here, but
It's okay.
that Jesus said, they're gonna put my body up on a tree, just as Moses put an idol up on a tree in the desert and created an egregon, a thought form, that some idol on a tree saved you. Just as Moses did that, they're gonna put my body up on a tree and do the same thing, draw all men to it. However, I'm teaching you that the way of the Father, the gate and the way of the Father is narrow, and few will find it.
That's right. That's right.
He was simply prophesying what was coming in Rome a few hundred years later, and how they would install that thought form and the indoctrination to go with it. Just like Exodus, you're setting me off now. Just like Exodus 20, it's no different than Exodus 20:20. Moses says, "What's wrong with y'all? That God is crazy." And we want to go back to the bull, because when that God kicked us out last time, we went to this other God and he's a bull. We want to go back to that one, because that one's nuts. In Exodus 20, Moses says, "Chill out. He's just trying to scare you into following the rules." Now that's my redneck translation of Exodus 20:20. I know you're freaking out right now, but don't be afraid. He's just trying to scare you. Jesus was saying the same thing, that they're going to put my body up on the tree, draw them into it, say, if you don't believe what they say and follow their rules, you're going to be roasted like a marshmallow.
Exactly.
And so I hate to start down on the rabbit trail, but the good news is our AD 70 moment is here.
And for those that people don't know what, if you don't know what that was the destruction of the temple, of the system, and that of really where Judaism was at in that moment, from coming back from the Babylonian exile, and a whole new religious system that had been created. It was destroyed.
Yep. And it couldn't be resurrected because they destroyed all the bloodlines, all the documentation, all the history, everything. It could not be resurrected. And that AD 70 moment, what's really interesting in that moment historically is that there was a moment in the siege when Titus, the Roman general, who I actually believe the character Paul in the New Testament is a combination of Titus and Josephus, but that's a whole nother podcast. But during the siege, Titus allowed the followers of the way that were left, that hadn't already been killed, to leave. And they went atop Mount Pella and watched the destruction. And you and I are there right now.
Do you know what that word Pella means, by the way?
No. It's got to be awesome.
It's a wonder. It's a sign. It's a miracle, and it's the mirror of Aleph. And so when you see the destruction, this is so beautiful. Oh my gosh. Pela met Aleph. When you see this destruction happening all around you, begin to speak revelation of that which has been instructed in your heart, the way of oneness unity, because that is the miracle, that is the sign, that is the marvel that is coming in this moment of destruction as we watch these religious system implode on itself, because the mirror of that is the Aleph. The mirror of that these religious structures that are coming down is for us to see that we're entering into oneness unity.
And everything
we're breaking that mirror.
And everything that's happening outside of you is happening inside of you.
That's right. And so all of these systems have to come down, because out of the ashes, the phoenix will rise. Those who are the burning ones, who are the sign and the wonder, that watched the destruction and knew what this meant as a monumental moment, that oneness unity was going to emerge from those ashes. And so what Rome thought was harmful, like, hey, look at what we're doing to your religious system, those who knew the way were rejoicing, because they knew that it was making room for Aurita once again, through the true Melta, to come forward out of those ashes. And we just, without having the fear of it, just the wonder of what's happening in this moment as we are watching these things in our lifetime, so something new, a new creation, can emerge.
Yep, the Romans were down there. There's a reason why Jesus said not one stone will be left on top of another, because the Romans were taking them all to get the gold that melted.
Right.
Down in between them. And while the Romans were busy digging up the gold, the Namousa, everyone else was on Mount Pella.
Exactly.
And that's where we are. So
that's right. Oh, wow.
An amazing time.
It is an amazing time, and I'm so glad to be a part of it. I'm so glad that we are here. I'm so glad you and I are having this conversation this morning. I have been so blessed. I've been so blessed, and I look forward to having people come to your YouTube channel, because you have so much to share, and I know you have a strong Facebook presence. but I'd like to see an increased level of presence on your YouTube channel so that people can hear what you're saying. You know, I get into the minutia of the letters, and my husband and you speak from the place of the heart. And between the two, between both of these, and when we can get Daryl online and get people over to Dale Hoffman's work, we are watching this destruction together, and we're not in it alone, because this new creation has to rise. So thank you for doing what you have done. And I will put a link in the description box when we put this up. I am going to put it in bite-sized pieces too, because I don't want people to miss all these beautiful nuggets that you shared this morning. And I appreciate your time.
That's why I try to do 10 to 15 minutes, especially in
I
the
know.
Sunday coffee, because
I know.
I get it. Well,
I
thanks
know.
for having me.
Thanks.
I've known this time was coming for a long time, by the way.
I'm glad it did. My
Party,
heart. I love you. I love your heart. I love you as a fellow brother. And I want to do this again. I really do want to do this again, because, you know, my heart soars when, because words of affirmation are part of my love language. That's what these sacred languages are all about. So when I can meet with somebody that has that same passion and desire, just the presence is just really overwhelming. And so my cup is full today. So thank you.
Me too.
All right. Well, shlama, shlama, shalom, shalom, namaste, until we get to talk again.
It's been awesome. I look forward to it.
Me too.